Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Petra Alderman, and I am the manager of the socio-economic Southeast Asia Centre here at the London School of Economics and Political Science. And I am also a researcher working on Thailand. Now, on behalf of the socio-economic Southeast Asia Centre, I'd like to welcome you all to today's SAC seminar. We are absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Janjira Sombatpoonsiri to a seminar titled Death by a Thousand Cuts, Digital Repression and Pro-Democracy Movements in Thailand. This talk is based on Janjira's forthcoming book with the University of Wisconsin Press. The book is going to be out early next year. So we are, I'm very excited to be able to offer you this opportunity to get a sneak peek into this very important piece of scholarship. But before I hand over and introduce our speaker properly, there are a few housekeeping rules that I would like to share with you. If you would like to post about the event, please feel free to do so. We are currently active on LinkedIn and Instagram, so make sure to tag us so that we can also repost. And we are also active on YouTube, where you can view some of the previous seminars that we've had. And this one will also find its way up online. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today. So Dr. Janjira Sombatpoonsiri is an assistant professor at the Institute of Asian Studies at Chulalongkorn University and a research fellow at German Institute for Global and Area Studies. Her current research focuses on protest movements, digital repression in autocracies, and democratic resilience. Her work has appeared in a wide range of high-ranking international disciplinary journals, as well as some area studies journals such as Globalization, Journal of Peace Research, Democratization, and Journal of Contemporary Asia, among many others. As I mentioned, her forthcoming book, Death by a Thousand Cuts, Digital Repression and Democracy in Thailand, will be out next year by the University of Wisconsin Press, so please keep your eye out for that one. And she also regularly contributes to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace as a research network member and writes for other policy-oriented outlets. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Janjira.
Thank you, Petra, for having me here, and thank you, the RSE socio-economic Southeast Asia Center for inviting me to share insights for my forthcoming book, the title of which is now 8,000 cuts, according to the marketing team of the Wisconsin University Press. They say the name is too long and death is not a good word. So 1,000 cuts it is. I think it reflects better the core idea of the book, which is basically the multifaceted effects of digital repression on pro-democracy movements in Thailand. So without further ado, I just like to start by sharing you this story. And I have to warn you first, this is not the most positive subject in the time of crisis in the world. So if you have trouble about some of the things that I would say, I'll just warn you, you might want to walk away or like not come back. I try to make it an academic subject, but again, the stories that I will share are real, and these are lived experience of the youth activists in Thailand. So now, let me start by sharing you this story. The young man in this picture was my former student at political science faculty at Thammasat University. His name is Cholathit. He was the key strategist behind the student movements that staged 6-month-long protests in Thailand, demanding democracy reform in 2020. And by 21, he faced 6 charges. 2 of them under Article 112, as many of you know here. This is the most severe, the most draconian, the most abused law in Thailand. And it could land you in jail at least 7 years to 15 years per count. We're talking per count. And Cholathit got 2 charges. At the same time, Cholathit was targeted with Pegasus spyware, while pro-government accounts also on social media coordinated campaigns against him, together with other leading activists during that time. In January this year, sadly, Shonlati decided that this has to be over. So he took his own life. And in his last letter, he mentioned that suffering these charges quietly and lonely contributed to that decision that he couldn't take it anymore. Now, this is not only Shonlati's story, right? Hundreds of student activists and participants in 2021 youth protest went through similar experiences, with some bearing legal and socio-economic burdens, others struggling with mental health issues as a result of digital repression. And so the book is the research journey of around 5 to 6 years, my own research on the internet controls in Thailand and information manipulation in Thailand and Southeast Asia in general, and particularly based on the 3-year research into how young activists in Thailand bear the consequence of digital repression after the protests in 2020 and 21. My argument is this: digital repression is different or has a massively different consequence than coercive repression, which sometimes produces a dramatic and visible image of bloody crackdowns on the street. Right, police beating people up, basically using violence, right? But digital repression works in a more insidious way by producing what I call, and I borrow terms of other activists and journalists in the field, academics in the field. It produces the effect of attritional effects. Right? That means that the consequences that these activists have to bear can last very long, and they tend to face multi-directional effects, including legal, socio-economic, and psychological burdens. So the book identifies these multiple and overlap forms of digital repression as 1,000 cuts. And what I will present today reflects the 3 main themes of the book. Number 1 is the ecosystem perspective to the subject. It means that when we study, we meaning scholars in this emerging subfield, when we study digital repression, we tend to look into either surveillance, spyware, for example, influence operations, online smear campaign targeting activists, or, internet shutdown, for example. We tend to look at one tactic, right? But I want to invite you to have a look at the ecosystem of how different methods work in tandem and how their effects reinforce one another. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the production side of digital repression. It means that how different security agencies use and deploy each of these tactics in tandem. Yeah. Third, and the most, I think, important contribution of the book is the reception side of digital repression, which has been underexplored so far. I want to understand the lived experience of people who had to endure digital repression. Yeah. So this is 3 things. Now, I won't go into details about this, but, I know for the academics in the room, if you're interested in methodology, this is how I gather data. It's a mixed method approach. I drawn on social media analysis, but also the good old qualitative analysis as well. I'll give you 2 seconds to read through the slides. So I don't have to do that. Yeah? Cool. So let me begin with the production side of Thailand's digital repression, starting with the overview of its ecosystem. And there are two sort of kinds of development that contributed to the sort of the infrastructure of digital repression in Thailand in terms of context. Number one is the red-yellow conflicts. For many of you who are in this room, you are familiar with the political divide in Thailand 10 years ago or more, which is now tend to be over somehow with all the elites allied their interest. But the conflicts took place in both on the streets and in social media. First of all, like on the internet, right, around 2005, 2006. And then it took to social media platforms. So especially the digital activism of red shirts, the anti-establishment force, was deemed as a threat. If I would be a bit more modern, I would use the term cyber threat to the political elite, right? So that's one. And then the second factor is the advent of the coup, military coup in Thailand in 2006, and then in 2014. The year 2006 and 2007 was crucial for the development of digital repression infrastructure because it gave birth to the Computer Crimes Related Act, or the CCA. And the CCA, of course, for many of you here, works to facilitate online censorship, among others, but also criminalize internet users who pose sort of problematic content online, including content that is considered as anti-monarchy, as anti-military, anti-court, so on and so forth. But most importantly, the CCA allows, for the first time, the expansive development of surveillance system in Thailand, which I will go through in a bit. So these are the two sides of the context that led to the development of digital repression ecosystem in Thailand. And I place digital surveillance in the center of this ecosystem because I think this surveillance constitutes the most crucial part of it, basically because it collects data. And data is gold. Why? Because data, and we're talking about intrusive surveillance that collects personal data, IP address of when you use internet, right? And lots of behavioral data that the authorities can collect from you. And this data allow authorities to identify who to charge. And the identification of activists has become precise over time. They basically know who ran the financial, who basically managed bank accounts of movements, who managed the small admin things within the movement. So with this information, the authorities can target criminalization better, basically the use of laws and other tactics better, which I will go through in a bit. Now, so with that ecosystem in mind, let's start with the trifecta, the tactical trifecta of this ecosystem. Number one is online smear campaign. And by the way, I put chapter there because, the book has 8 chapters, excluding introduction and conclusion. And the first 2 chapters are basically, history of repression in Thailand and the ecosystem that I just mentioned. And then the rest is sort of the explanation of tactical operation and the impact. Now, smear campaigns are actually a long-standing practice of the Thai state when it comes to repression. It's a part of propaganda sort of infrastructure that can be traced back to the Cold War era, right? And the organizations that sort of operated, that ran propaganda campaigns are many, but the most crucial one is the ISOC, or the Internal Security Operations Command. So while the ISOC and other organizations still rely on the same kind of discourses as the long-standing propaganda practices, like, what we call astroturfing, or like the positive messaging, the pressing of the main institutions in the country. But increasingly, organizations like ISOC and others rely more on Black campaigns. And these are basically smear campaigns. So Black campaigns are designed to sow public doubt about activists' moral authority through character assassination. So while, the accusations that activists, are anti-monarchy, anti-nation, these kind of accusations are there, but more and more the messaging is designed to attack moral authority, meaning that accounts like what you see on your left-hand side, or actually your right-hand side, I don't know, whatever that is, that account is what we found in our database, right? So what we did was that we started by observing the lay of land. We tried to understand the accounts that constantly generate smear campaigns, and we could sort of flag around 50 plus accounts, and based on this list of 50 accounts, then we mine their posts and see what kind of themes are there. Now, so the account on that side is what we call the persona account, right? So this is the account that has personality. It acts as if it's like a, celebrity gossip outlet, and in Thailand, you are familiar with this, but instead of gossiping celebrities, it leaked unverified scandals of activists. Unverified, sometimes like decontextualized kind of image would be posted to accuse activists of being corrupt, of having inappropriate sexual behaviors, or having disruptive behavior, for example, right? So, and this is what I mean by attacking moral authority of activists. So it's basically undermining their reputation, using the moral discourse, and making the public mistrust them as a person. So now you have this kind of persona accounts. And the way in which the campaigns work is that it would have networked sock puppet accounts. So these are trolls. These are accounts that work en masse, right? Thousands, tens of thousands of accounts would basically coordinate the sharing and co-sharing of the post posted by persona accounts like this. And these days also like real people, influencers, yeah? And the sort of posting, co-posting, and co-reposting behaviors are important because this is ways in which Black campaigns exploit social media algorithms to increase visibility of negative posts and to amplify messages, to gain engagement from the public. These are some examples. I don't want to go through, each of our metrics in detail, but this is what we sort of detected. These networked accounts. These are different accounts, but they tend to repost the same post. And this post was originally posted by a leading activist, saying that basically she announced that she didn't get bail, right? And the accounts would retweet this in order to attract negative comments, right? So once they do that altogether, they create some sort of a, fabricated social engagement, right? So that's one thing. And then down below, what we try to understand is whether or not these posts were automated or they are posted by a bunch of humans. And our suspicion is that it's both. And the reason why we know is this is the metrics we use called sleepiness, means that not only that we want to understand the frequency of posts by the sock puppet accounts, but we also want to understand when they stop posting, right? Because people like you and me, even if we are social media addicts, we need to sleep. So we assume that normally in a normal behavior, you would stop posting maybe between 8 to 10 hours a day, or maybe less. Some people don't sleep, right? But there must be a period of time that people stop posting. Now, as you can see here, sorry, I didn't put the highlight there, but there are a few lines. So the blue dots represent the break times. There are a few lines that appear here without any blue dots. And these are the accounts. This is the name of the accounts that we flagged. These are the accounts, for example, Sue Love Boss, very, very active. And then Happy Indie 6, for example. So these guys don't sleep at all. And so we suspected that this could be automated, or they might have a lot of people running the same accounts and they take shifts, right? So that's that. That's coordinated smear campaigns. And this is what we mean. This is not just about hate speech. It's not just about random smear, slander messages. This is about coordination, making use of social media algorithms. Yeah. Then the book kind of, because of the emphasis on the ecosystem perspective, we want to understand how smear campaigns are connected to what we call digital lawfare. So in Thailand, many of you know here, many of you here know that lawfare is, a routine, a usual, a normalized practice in among the Thai elites. Basically, the weaponization of laws against the opposition and dissidents. Now, during the protest in 2020 and 21, there were sort of distinct patterns of lawfare, and these are reported by NGOs, right? It's not our original research, but I just want to flag you here first, just to see the sort of evolving patterns of lawfare in Thailand, and in order to connect that to online smear campaigns, yeah? So there are three main patterns I want to highlight. One is that the stacking up of charges. This means that if you're an activist and you're super critical, you'll probably get charged with at least 20, 30, if not 40. And we're talking about serious charges. Some of my former students got 40 charges at least, some 30. And with this number, half of the charges that they got could be 112, Article 112. Now, the stacking of the charges is an important tactic because it basically makes you spend your time, energy, and resources on the court battles, right? So basically, you don't have the resources and the mental capacity to go on with your activism because you have to basically fight for your life. So that's one. Two is to make things worse, especially in the case of Article 112, that allow both citizens and the authorities to file complaints. In general, for general, normal defamation cases, of course, if you are the victim that are defamed, you can file complaint. But in the case of Article 112, any citizens can file complaints on behalf of the palace. Yeah. So that opens another door for what I call royalist, pro-palace activist groups. So what they do is that they would monitor dissident social media feeds in order to screenshot some of the questionable content, submit that to the police, file the complaints, right? But the most terrible part is that they would identify where you actually live. For example, if you live in the northern province of Thailand, they would file the complaint in the deep south. So that you have to travel from the north to the south, to the police station, right? And I will show in a bit when I discuss surveillance tactics, how they do that. So that's second. Third is the tendency of the courts to deny bail. And this is the case mostly for Article 112, the accused of Article 112. Now, so that's three patterns, evolving patterns of lawfare in Thailand. What we try to understand is, of course, lawfare works to censor online speech, works to punish internet users, but how is that connected to online smear campaigns? So what we do is we sort of look into data sets of run or created by the Thai Lawyers for Human Rights. So they have an excellent data set on targets of Article 112. So we look into these data sets, right? And we want to understand how many times did the accounts, remember the smear accounts that we monitor later, earlier, did the smear accounts mention in the broad data sets that we got by mining that post, right? So we then run a statistical analysis, and then this is the list of mentions of names of activists by the accounts. These are the accounts, right? So this is the list of names of activists who were mentioned by the black accounts. And of course, top the list is Piyarat Jongthep. Piyarat was the lead activist of a sub-activist group called Vivo that served as like a, peacekeeping task. Though basically they were guards of the protest movement. So his name is top the list. But interestingly, second and third to that are Parit Penguin and Anon Nampa, who is now has been detained for years now. And these two were mentioned hundreds and hundreds of times over the period of 1 year that we collected data. 2 years. And the accounts that mention these activist names the most, remember the accounts that don't sleep? Love boss mention activist names the most. And then remember the account that acts as a gossip, celebrity gossip account. That's the blue dot, the red dot in the middle, right? So the accounts that we flagged as coordinated smear campaigns tend to mention the names of activists accused of violating Article 112 quite a bit. Now, what are the functions then of, have to check my time because then I tend to talk and talk. I think, okay, I think it should be fine. So the functions of smear campaigns in relation to lawfare is this. When we run, we sort of selected two cases that faced the most 112 charges and were mentioned most by the flag accounts. And these are Parit and Anon. These are the two leading activists, right? And what we found, we want to understand throughout the judicial process that they face, from the charge being filed, from the police summon, to prosecution process, to trial process. When did the smear accounts mention their names? And what did that say about the functions of smear campaigns in relation to lawfare? So what we found is two things. Number one is the mentions tend to peak before the prosecution by the attorney. And secondly, the mentions tend to peak during hunger strikes by these activists. And this is very fascinating because the courts didn't grant them bail, and leading activists tend to stage hunger strikes in jail, right? So it seems that the smear messages try to undermine the credibility and the legitimacy of activists staging protests against the judicial decision from jail. So, and this is allied with existing sort of studies regarding autocratic legitimation, that smear campaigns serve to, of course, delegitimize activists, but at the same time, it legitimizes judicial decisions. Moving on, second last sort of key points now. Then surveillance. The surveillance ecosystem in Thailand is divided into two sort of methods. One is mass surveillance, and two is intrusive or targeted surveillance. So mass surveillance is the use of social media monitoring tools, and these are largely used by the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society, MDES. And they're used for all kinds of purposes, but there's also the purpose of understanding what is being said online, right? So that's mass surveillance. Then CCTV, which is quite fascinating, but also horrifying at the same time, because Bangkok has tens of thousands of CCTVs. And the police basically leverage sort of visual data from CCTV to file charges against activists. And then I will give you an example of how this whole thing actually works. Then targeted surveillance comprises use of spyware or hacking tools. In 2021, actually late 2020 already, Apple sent warnings to Thai activists that their phones were defected and attacked by supposedly state actors. So spyware. And this is something that emerged during the protests, the use of GPS tracking devices. So a lot of activists, and including opposition politicians, found their vehicles being, underneath their vehicles, they would file GPS device if they park their vehicles around the protest sites. And so, yeah, a mystery that no explanation was given by the authorities so far where these devices came from. So now these sort of methods of surveillance provide different sets of data to the authority. Social media monitoring provides textual data. CCTV provides visual data. Spyware provides the most personal data. Your transactions, your financial transactions, who you text to, your address books in your phone. And I can talk about this a bit later during the Q&A. This is one of the most advanced spyware is Pegasus, and it's zero-click. And that means it can turn on and off your camera and recording device by itself. And then GPS, of course, geolocation data. I will give you one example of how this data was gathered and being used in tandem. There's one case of activist, young activist, and she, her name appeared in the movement's bank account, right? Because when movements mobilize funding, then they have to publicize that, if you want to support us, then you donate here and there. So her name was there. And so the police one day raided her dormitory and charged her under Computer Crimes Act and the reason why the police could do that, because the police triangulated different pieces of evidence. Number one is that the police claim that based on the CCTV data, when the protesters were live streaming their activities, the police captured her holding her phone, right? So this is the phone, and it has like these glittering cases, I suppose. It looks very distinct. And then the police triangulate this data, cross-check this data with her social media posts that shows the same phone. And the social media post was retrieved. And that's my suspicion. There's no hard evidence here. It was the police found that social media post either through social media listening tools or a person taking a screenshot of that for the police, right? So that's that. There's sort of triangulation and the geolocation data of where she was during the time of live streaming. Then she got charged. Thing is, evidence from the use of spyware cannot be used in court, right? The only thing that can be used in court, it cannot be used in court, I have to clarify, because the police then had to obtain court orders, yeah? And it takes really long time. And so what the police did was, and this is my own tracing, and I know this is on camera, this is not accusation, it's my own academic causal tracing. It could be that because the person here was attacked with Pegasus spyware the most, I think around 10 times. And it would allow the police an insight into her role. I mean, of course, her name is there, but her role, not only as a bank account holder, but also someone who might run, PR activities of the movement suspiciously, right? And then based on this knowledge, then the police can try to find evidence of what she did in public space through CCTVs and what she did on social media through social media listening. So that's that. I think we don't have much time left. I just want to get to the last part of this. So imagine yourself as one of these young activists targeted simultaneously by all these methods of digital repression. How would you feel? So the chart shows around 52 activists who responded to our survey, how they described their experience, their emotional experience of being targeted online. And so topping the chart was the feeling of dehumanization, followed by anger, right? And so it's interesting, there are a handful of activists who say that they feel sympathetic to people who basically harass them. And other, I don't know what other means, but I mean, the surveys had open-ended sort of questions. So I had to look into the sort of the questionnaire to identify that. But, the gender dynamics of this is very interesting. I don't show the data here, but basically the majority of female activists who were targeted would say that they felt dehumanized and angry. And the majority of people who said they sympathize the sort of the harassers are male. Interesting. And I think, I'm not a gender expert here, but one could say that male activists, because of the norms, you have to act tough. Sometimes you cannot reveal your vulnerability. And that's part of the activist norms. And that kind of, and again, this is my own observation, that kind of allies with suicide cases, which I will describe a bit later. The suicide cases that were found successful were actually carried out by male activists because there seems to be no avenues of discussing their troubles, while the thoughts of doing so were expressed mostly by female activists. Now, the feelings that, dehumanization and anger, these are shaped by the lived experience of digital repression, right? And initially, when we launched the questionnaire, my assumption would be that because we want to understand, impact of digital repression on activism, and I thought that the impact would be direct, that people would say that, well, of course, censorship and surveillance stops them from engaging in activism. But what we found is more kind of indirect. The majority of the respondents, around 60%, combining between people who say, digital repression has very negative effects and some negative effects combine this. Over 60% said that digital repression impacts their mental health the most. And this is deeply intertwined with their ability to continue studying or working. And most importantly, with their willingness to remain active in the movement. So it's all interconnected, right? Because if you feel depressed, and this, with the open-ended questions, respondents were encouraged to provide some details of how they feel when they said they have mental health struggles. And you have all sorts of things, depression, burnout, anxiety, PTSD. And so, this whole sort of mental health struggles prevented them from doing what they have to do to survive financially and to climb up a social ladder, because these are all young activists, and to continue their activism. Now, there are cases when it comes to socio-economic opportunities that are being undermined through the experience of digital repression. There are some nuances as well, because some of the young activists, some of them are minors, and they financially depend on their parents. And when they are targeted with lawfare and are framed as anti-monarchy, for example, these carry a taboo. And their families, if the families are quite conservative, they will cut ties with them. And there are cases of kids being on basically being homeless. Of course, soon after that, they were taken in by other more senior activists to live together in the house. So there's a whole support network, right? But this is the result of stigmatization. It's the result of their families cannot be seen as associated with them anymore. And so I worked, as I said, this is a big project, and I could not do this alone. I worked with an investigative journalist and data scientist, and with the investigative journalist together, we created a documentary that sort of allows the public to access our research in an easy, digestible way, and just humanize the activists targeted by digital repression. So that if you are interested in, this is the link to the documentary, the QR code. So, I don't want to highlight sort of or basically paint the image that activists are just victims, right? These are not true. But the idea is to bring to light how digital repression hurts people. It's not when in extreme cases, when activists decided that the life is not worth anymore, not worth living anymore, it has compound factors, right? And the experience of digital repression can be one of these compound factors, yeah? But regardless, these are real effects, and it drags people down because it goes on for years. A lot of activists are still now fighting court cases and mental health struggles. And a lot of young people, many of you might know this experience. Well, a lot of young people that face charges, they decided they cannot. It's not worth living in the country anymore because they can't. They know that this is a lost battle already, so they have to leave. Yeah. So then you have like exile dissidents as a result of that. Now, to end this presentation, as I said, this has been a grim, a grim journey. It's not rosy, and I hope it doesn't destroy your lunch appetite. But I want to emphasize that the book does not treat dissidents as passive victims of digital repression. Through the survey, we also asked them directly how they cope with the experience of being targeted online and how they even resist that, right? And many who suffer significant psychological distress, for example, spoke of seeking mental health support. Actually, there are groups now that provide such a support in Thailand, although only emerging, but there are support networks. Those who primarily said that they are afraid of digital surveillance thought that the best way to deal with this is to be more aware about digital security measures, how they could get online safely, and how they could continue digital activism safely online. Many activists and dissidents even fought back. Some of them have taken legal action against the so-called perpetrators, including the authorities and the company that manufactures spyware used against them. These examples remind us that repression and resistance often coexist. That repression does not always diminish conditions for new rounds of collective action, and that people remained creative and resilient even under the most difficult circumstances. Thank you.